Okay, happy to break this up for you. So the fact of the matter is we don't know exactly where it starts. It's one of those earlier indigenous, agrarian, pagan, yeah. But this one has great history. And one of you mentioned it before, I think my thing was you. So at some point in our history, the main way to ritually Jew was to go to the temple in Jerusalem on pilgrimage a few times a year. It's true for every religion. And if you go to Comic-Con, that's your pilgrimage. And if it's Disneyland once a year, that's your pilgrimage. So Jerusalem temple, like every other self-respecting indigenous culture, had pilgrimages. Now, when you go on pilgrimage to the temple, whether it's a holiday or not, you need to give offerings. And as a member of an agrarian society, talk to Elizabeth Warren about that, you got to pay your taxes. So, although obviously not everybody in government thinks so, but when you pay your taxes, there's got to be a way to do that in a way that makes everybody feel equal. So since many people grew fruit, the idea was that you're going to bring fruit to the temple when on Sukkot, let's say, it's time to celebrate your apple harvest. But the Torah dictates you can only bring tax-worthy apples from a fruit tree that's 4 years old. And your grapevine is not worthy of taxation before it's 4 years old, because a tree needs time to grow and to have enough yield. Great. Since when do trees have birthdays? How am I going to know if my tree is 5 years old or 3? I inherited this farm from grandpa. Oh, I just planted this. So the rabbis came up with a great idea. Each year on the full moon of the month of Shvat, as the winter in Israel or in that part of the world is beginning to go away, we're going to celebrate the tree's birthday. And you can begin counting when are your trees tax worthy. So Tu B'Shvat, the full moon of the month of Shvat, began as a taxation holiday for those of us who grow fruit. Obviously, not a very popular Jewish occupation these days, but must have been. Fast forward a few hundred years, 2 more, no Jew grows fruit, and we live in exiles or in diasporas of choice all over, and we're in real estate, and there's no temple anymore either. So what the hell do you do with this little tax day? So it begins to get reinvented. So first of all, it becomes at some point reinvented as the birthday of the trees, honoring the trees, right? Let's honor the trees, y'all. There's a part of our DNA that's related to trees. And then it becomes a mystical holiday. Well, it's not just the trees, but it becomes the tree as in the tree of life and the Kabbalistic tree of life. And there's already a medieval metaphor for what is tree and what is fruit and what does it mean to come together. And the fact that the first moment humans do anything in the Garden of Eden is eat a apple. It's not an apple.
Piece of
fruit. No, interesting. Apple made it into its collective consciousness through translations, but it says fruit. Could have been a mango. But the first thing that humans do is we eat in the Torah. And Augustine made original sin out of it, both sex and food, but in our tradition, it was just something about not obeying or something. So there's something about where our relationship to food and fruit. So the Seder that Stefan talked about is a Kabbalistic tradition from the medieval period where Jews would come together, very esoteric and minor, and eat fruits and eat 15 kinds of fruit to fix the sin of Adam and Eve, and to really relish mindful eating, and to understand the complexity between flour and fruit and taste and smell and wine, and do the sensuous gastro-mystic ritual of Tu B'Shvat. Very lesser known. Fast forward to Zionism, 19th, 20th century. Jews begin to live in Israel. They're not so interested in this mystical mumbo-jumbo. They're leaving religion behind. But they're socialists, and they're building the land. And what do you need in a new land? Trees. Never mind that there were plenty of trees there, and the land wasn't empty of people or trees, but they started doing this whole thing that many of you said, we plant trees. And so in the 20th century, Tu B'Shvat becomes a tree planting holiday. We now know that the majority of the trees planted in the 20th century were so toxic to Israeli ecosystem, many of them had to be pulled out. But sorry if you paid money at any point to the JNF. But then came the 1960s and 70s and environmental consciousness. And many people, Arthur Wask included, said, can we like reimagine Tu B'Shvat? It's not taxation. We do love trees, but can we make it the 24-hour of we are part of the earth? And we want to honor the tree's birthday with environmental consciousness. So Tu B'Shvat only now is being yet again reinvented, from agricultural taxation to some mystical tree to something you do with fruit and the original sin to Zionist tree planting to environmental consciousness. And so there are rituals that are done around Tu B'Shvat.